Good evening. Welcome to an evening with civil rights legend John Dorsey Due. My name is Paul Ortiz. I'm a professor of history and director of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Samuel Proctor Oral History Program is affectionately known as SPOHP. I'll be using that term throughout the evening. And on behalf of the Oral History Program at the University of Florida, I just want to welcome everyone this evening for what is going to be a really joyous occasion. We're going to hear original songs, original compositions, original poetry, testimonials to this giant of a man, a person who is a friend to all of those who are oppressed, a friend of all of those who strive for freedom. And I'm referring to none other than Attorney John Dorsey Due. And as many of you know, Attorney Due was nominated this year for an honorary doctorate in humane letters. The University of Florida was going to bestow that doctorate to Attorney Due at our commencement in April. Well, a little thing happened called the global pandemic. And that put a temporary stay on that particular occasion. We'd also planned a reception in honor of John to honor him not only for his incredible life in the civil rights and human rights movement, not only for the fact that he and his wife, Patricia Stevens Due, were the first family of civil rights for half a century in Florida, but we wanted to honor John Due also because of the incredible educational work he's done in keeping the legacies of the freedom movement, of the civil rights movement alive. And what I mean by this is that John has worked with countless students from Florida A&M University, Florida Memorial, Florida State, and University of Florida. And tonight you're going to hear many video testimonials from those former students. Some of those students now are successful attorneys, graduates of Harvard Law School and Georgetown and Howard and Florida A&M. So this is a man who not only was a giant in terms of being a civil rights activist in the 60s, but carries on that legacy and teaches it to young people today. So we wanted to welcome all of you. Again, welcome to an evening with civil rights legend John Due. We know a lot of people are going to be joining us kind of midstream, so I will periodically kind of re-invite people. And throughout the course of the evening, I'm going to give a lot of thanks because a lot of thanks are due in putting this event together. The first person I want to thank is our executive producer, none other than the technical coordinator for SPOHP, Deborah Hendricks. Many of you know Deborah as a person who teaches oral history, digital production, and this is really Deborah's program. She did so much work in putting it together, so I want to thank her from the outset. And I also want to thank my dear friend and colleague and guide, John Due, for agreeing to be with us here this evening. John, it's so great to be back together again with you.
Okay, Paul?
Yes.
When did we start this journey?
I think we started it, John, on our way to Mississippi. I was driving, I took a couple van loads of students to Macomb, and we stopped in Tallahassee, and you spent 2 hours with us, regaling us about stories about Macomb, Mississippi, right?
Right. And what year was that?
That probably was in either 2009 or
Okay.
2009, because then you went with us to Macomb shortly after to do a series of civil rights history workshops at Macomb High School in 2010.
Okay. And this was one of your first activities of the oral history project, wasn't it?
It was one of the first times we went to Mississippi. A lot of people asked us, why would you go to Mississippi? What's there? And we said, really, that's the centerpiece of American history. That's the heartbeat of the movement, right?
Right. Okay. Well, I really thank you for giving me an opportunity to participate in this journey, since 2009. And then all of a sudden I hear that University of Florida is going to award me a Doctor of Humanities?
A Doctor of Humane Letters.
Oh, Humane Letters. Okay. Well, they call it a Doctor of Humane Letters. But Paul, I call it a Doctor of Humanity, because that's what my work has always been, and what Patricia's work has always been, to doctor humanity.
Exactly. Well, Mr. Due, you can call it, you've earned the right to call it whatever you want, right? And this evening, for folks who are just joining us, by the way, John, we also are going to play clips from that wonderful program, talking about our early, how we got to know each other. That following year, you and your lovely wife traveled to Gainesville, Florida, and put on an incredible program. And right behind me is a program, is a poster for an event that we called an Evening with the Dues. And it was a remarkable program with you and Patricia. And we had 400 people packed into that auditorium. It was just an incredible. And so we're going to play clips of that tonight a bit later. But I wanted to go ahead and get started, John, if you don't mind, because we have a lot of people that want to talk in your honor tonight. And if we don't get the ball rolling, I think your daughters are going to put me in the timeout corner for keeping you up too late. So if you don't mind, we'll go and get started.
Okay, with one observation, it is do and do. And that's why I have this picture of Patricia right next to my heart, instead of a library of law books in the background. So go on ahead, Patricia and I are ready.
Okay, thank you, John. Well, there's a lot of incredible people that are here to welcome us this evening. And then we also have a big surprise. I want to let everyone know President Fox of the University of Florida has a big surprise for us in a few minutes. But before that, we want to start our program by bringing welcome from a really remarkable individual. Clovis Watson Jr. is a member of the Florida House of Representatives, representing District 20. He has represented District 20 since 2012. His current term ends at the end of this year. Clovis started as a police officer. He is a graduate of Santa Fe College. He is very beloved in the Gainesville community. He's known as one of the most progressive state representatives in Florida politics. So he is here today to provide a welcome for us.
I am State Representative Clovis Watson Jr., and I am so very honored to be a part of this wonderful and meaningful recognition of Mr. Due. Mr. Due, thank you. Thank you for standing up for justice. Thank you for standing up for fairness. Thank you for standing against injustice during a very difficult time in our history. And thank you for paving the way for me and so many others. I am where I am today because of you and your hard work. And so many other leaders today can say we are here because of you. We can because you did. Sir, I'm honored to be in your midst. And finally, to the University of Florida, thank you for honoring Mr. Due's legacy, the history that he has fought for many decades, for his work, for him fighting for the people. Mr. Due, you are due this honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Watson. Our next welcomer is none other than the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Humanities, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at the University of Florida, Dr. David Richardson. Dave is also a professor of chemistry, and in the process of nominating Attorney Due for an honorary doctorate, Dean Richardson wrote a very eloquent letter of support to John's file. So we'll hear now a welcome from Dean Dave Richardson.
On behalf of the faculty, staff, and students of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, I welcome everyone who is watching today. It is my great pleasure to congratulate Mr. John Due on his recognition by the University of Florida as a Doctor of Humane Letters. Mr. Due is a pioneer of the civil rights movement, a groundbreaking legal advocate for human rights,
Mike, can I talk
and
to him?
an inspired leader in public policy. In a career that has spanned the breadth of the civil rights movement, Florida has long been a particular interest of Mr. Due's efforts. Today, he remains committed to matters of immediate relevance to Florida, such as the restoration of voting rights for felons. Given his illustrious career as a proponent of freedom and prosperity for all citizens, I am proud that Liberal Arts and Sciences served as the home college for the honorary degree nomination. The world is changing rapidly. We must all be committed to helping and supporting our students as they engage with the profound social issues that have been Mr. Due's focus for so long. 20 years ago, the Kellogg Foundation noted that, quote, to cope effectively and creatively with emerging national and world trends, future leaders will not only need to possess new knowledge and skills, but will also be called upon to display a high level of emotional and spiritual wisdom and maturity. These are the attributes that John Due has in abundance. The authors of that report had no inkling of the world-shaking events that our students would face in the 21st century, but their words ring true today. In our efforts to develop these leadership skills, Mr. Due has served as an indelible role model for UF students as they look toward building a society with equal opportunities for all. Our college's name reflects the long-established concept of a liberal education, in which liberal has a meaning that derives from the same Latin root as liberty. It is therefore indeed fitting that we support the award of a doctorate in humane letters for this bold American who has devoted his life to the pursuit of freedom and fairness for all. Mr. Due, I offer you my deepest appreciation for your life's work and our heartfelt congratulations.
Thank you so much, Dean Richardson, for the eloquent welcoming and congratulations. Next, it's an honor for me to introduce my friend and colleague, Provost Joe Glover of the University of Florida. Provost Glover has a special place in SPOHP's heart because he has been an avid supporter of our African American history research programs, and his support has allowed us to embark upon field trips and field work throughout the United States. And Provost Glover has a few words of welcome that he'd like to share with us now.
Greetings to John Due, his family, and everyone gathered for this tribute. As the university's chief academic officer, my focus is on providing UF students with an exceptional college education. To achieve this goal, we try to ensure that they have access to the leading figures in their areas of inquiry. For students interested in civil rights and the history of the civil rights movement, we are incredibly fortunate to have the ability to bring them together with John Due. Attorney Due's engagement with our students has been nothing short of awe-inspiring. He has worked directly and personally with hundreds of students as a guest lecturer in the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program's annual Mississippi Freedom Project. The experience has literally changed lives. More than a few students, having spent a day listening and learning from him, have changed their careers to pursue public interest, civil rights, and immigrant rights law. Indeed, In addition to providing knowledge and inspiration, Attorney Due has given precious career and scholarly advice to students who have subsequently matriculated to law schools across the country. Many of these alumni have since graduated from such schools as Cornell, UF, Howard, Georgetown, and Duke. Those graduates and others influenced by Mr. Due are now advancing causes critical to a healthy society, from restorative justice to labor law reform. Particularly in this time of so much activity against racism and its damaging impacts, we could hardly have a more valuable partner in civil rights education or a more valued teacher and mentor than John Due. On behalf of the University of Florida, thank you, Mr. Due, for sharing your experience, expertise, and profound knowledge to the benefit of our students, our state, and our society.
Thank you, Provost Glover. Next up is the president of the University of Florida, Kent W. Fox. And this is a bit unusual in order because usually among the academic leadership, the president of the university gives the opening, and then you have the provost and then the dean and then people under those individuals. This time, however, we had to switch the order because we have a big surprise for everyone. And I'm going to introduce President Fox by way of saying that he made a very important announcement just a few days ago about putting the University of Florida in the struggle against racism more deeply and more intensively than ever before. So we're very grateful for his leadership. And without further delay, I want us to give it up for President Fox, who has a big surprise for us towards the very end of his welcoming remarks. Now listen carefully or you might miss it.
Good evening, everyone. I am delighted to have this opportunity to honor and celebrate John Due. For half a century, Mr. Due and his beloved wife, Patricia Stevens Due, were Florida's first family of civil rights. He is a visionary civil rights attorney who helped to pioneer the key legal tactic of moving civil rights cases to federal court so that his clients could avoid racially biased state courts. Following many other seminal contributions to the movement, Mr. Due dedicated his long and storied career to confronting issues of poverty, education, fair housing, mass incarceration, and community policing in Miami and elsewhere in Florida. He is the guiding force behind key statewide gains, not only in civil rights, but also in equality, school integration, and labor law. Many of the causes espoused by Mr. Due are at the center of today's Black Lives Matter movement. His leadership, advocacy, persistence, passion, and humanity serve as models for the changemakers driving that movement forward. Indeed, Mr. Due and his legacy show everyone what can be achieved and what must be achieved when people come together to seek progress for Black Americans and for all marginalized or disenfranchised people. The College of Liberal Arts and Sciences last year nominated Mr. Due for an honorary doctorate of humane letters, the University of Florida's highest honor, and the University of Florida Board of Trustees unanimously approved that nomination. We had looked forward to presenting Mr. Due with that doctorate at our spring commencement, but sadly we were unable to do so because of the cancellation of in-person commencement ceremonies due to COVID-19. And so today, I have the distinct honor and privilege of presenting the UF Honorary Doctorate of Humane Letters to John Due. Mr. Due, on behalf of everyone at the University of Florida, many congratulations and thank you for all that you have done for Black Americans, for our country, and for all of us. Congratulations.
We're here. So I would like you to see this beautiful certificate. The University of Florida has conferred on John Dorsey Due Jr. the degree Doctor of Humane Letters,
attorney,
and all the rights and privileges thereunto appertaining. In witness here whereof this diploma duly signed has been issued and the seal of the university affixed, issued by the Board of Trustees upon recommendation of the faculty of the University Senate at Gainesville this 30th day of April 2020. There you are, Dad.
all right.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. And we got work to do. Professor Jonathan Gibbs, who after the Civil War founded FSU, FAMU, and University of Florida, and we're still continuing the tradition of Jonathan Gibbs, and we're going to stay in touch. Okay?
All right. Thank you so much, John. And for folks who just joined us, we witnessed the conferral of the degree of Honorary Doctorate of Humane Letters, which is the highest honor. It's the highest award that the University of Florida can possibly confer onto Attorney John Dorsey Due Jr. for his lifetime of work in the freedom movement and human rights movement, for his lifetime of passing the legacies of that movement on to countless students. And we're going to hear from many of those students this evening who are going to provide testimonials. But first, we have a special original musical treat. John, this is a group of students. This is an octet, and I want to provide just a very brief introduction. This octet of student musicians from the University of Florida decided to get together and compose a civil rights medley. This is arranged by Jeremy Jones from Music Education. And what was challenging about this in the age of the pandemic is each of the musicians had to play in a separate room. In other words, they couldn't be together in the same room. But you will recognize the music that they're playing because it's so well done. And I'll read a very brief introduction. This octet of musicians made up of students and alumni from the UF School of Music are playing a short band arrangement of Lift Every Voice and Sing and We Shall Overcome. The medley begins with Lift Every Voice and Sing and then shifts to We Shall Overcome. Many musicians are turning to digital means to create music since our regular venues are closed. Since most Samuel Proctor oral history program events are accompanied with music, the musicians felt that this digital event should have music. And as John knows, we always like to start freedom movement events with music because music brings us together. Singing, playing instruments brings us together, and that's a necessity for building solidarity. And without further delay, let's hear our wonderful octet of musicians performing a civil rights medley. Let's have a round of virtual applause for the wonderful octet from University of Florida School of Music. That was just amazing. Thank you so much. Next on the program are two longtime friends, both Attorney Due and the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. And we're going to share them with you in consecutive sequences here. I wanted to begin by introducing E. Stanley Richardson. E. Stanley Richardson is the first ever Alachua County Poet Laureate. Mr. Richardson is the founder of Art Speaks GNV. He serves as director of the North Central Florida Alachua County Youth Poet Laureate Program. He's a published author and has received numerous poetry awards. And Mr. Richardson honors us so much this evening with an original composition, original poem in honor of this evening and in honor of John Doe. And immediately following Stanley Richardson is Mr. Marna Weston. And Mr. Weston is a longtime freedom historian with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Project. Mr. Weston is a teacher at Oak Hall School, I should say. He is a person who has done countless oral history interviews with our African American Oral History Project. But before Mr. Weston even joined us, he wrote his master's thesis at Florida State University on the civil rights work of Patricia Stephens Due, in particular, an important stand that she took early in the freedom struggle in Tallahassee that turned out to be a pivotal moment and literally a history-turning moment in the history of the civil rights movement. So first we'll hear from Mr. Richardson, an original poem, and then from Mr. Weston, reading from his master's thesis about Patricia Stephens Due.
Greetings. I am E. Stanley Richardson, Poet Laureate, Alachua County, Florida. I will be sharing with you a poem that I wrote for this occasion titled All of Me. Before I begin, let me first say thank you to the University of Florida, Dr. Paul Ortiz, the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. I am honored to be here with you for this wonderful occasion. I first met Attorney Due a few years ago in Tallahassee when I accompanied the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program on their Mississippi Freedom Project. He talked to me as though he had known me for years, and he reminded me a lot of my own father, his nurturing spirit, his love for books, and his laughter. Attorney Due has a wonderful sense of humor, and I think it is necessary if one is to devote themselves to a lifetime of fighting for freedom in the trenches and still keep their sanity. So I want to say thank you to Attorney John Doe Jr. for his service, for a lifetime of fighting for freedom, and thank you also to his family. All of me. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. Black lives matter. No justice, no peace. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. Black lives matter. No justice, no peace. And go home to my Lord and be free. All those years ago, just yesterday, I heard the freedom fighters say, freedom is not free. Freedom is not free. It must be fought for continuously, courageously. from the nation's capital, from way down in Wabash Valley, from the corn silk highways of Hoosier land to the glades and muck of South Florida and all the battleground in between. Places like Mississippi, Tallahassee, Alabama, Mariana, St. Augustine. Oh, that which thine ears have heard, thine eyes have seen, the wondrous allure of Jet magazine. The beginning of beauty and struggle, family and freedom, learning and sharing, what it takes to live in this world. All those years ago, just yesterday, I heard the freedom fighters say, freedom is not free. Freedom is not free. It must be fought for continuously, courageously, in community, in protest, in sit-ins and boycotts, in the do's, the don'ts, the whatnots, if you please, in courtroom legalese, in freedom summers and frigid winters, in resistance, in demonstration, in preparation for battle, a task to pass down to our children, our grandchildren, to teach them, to give them legacy and power and beauty and stories to tell and books to read and songs to sing and war dances and mantras. If it is meant to be, it is up to me. If it is meant to be, it is up to me. Oh, freedom. Freedom, oh, freedom. Freedom from, freedom to become who you are unhindered. Freedom. Freedom from, freedom to, all of me loves all of you. All those years ago, just yesterday, I heard the freedom fighters say, freedom is not free. Freedom is not free. It must be fought for continuously, courageously, in perpetuity. The battle continues. You see, this is not the end, but the beginning. Thank you.
Today, we celebrate humanitarian, attorney, and now Dr. John Due. With his permission, I'd like to offer a brief aside. A thank you to President Fox, Provost Glover, Dr. Paul Ortiz, and the faculty of the University of Florida who pushed for this honor. But please don't stop there. Please push just a little bit harder. Build a lasting memorial statue and academic center to honor Virgil D. Hawkins of Lake County, Florida. The reason all Black students, however they came to University of Florida, did so, and a reflection of our capacity to honor Dr. John Due. Thank you, Dr. Due, for personally approving this message. Now, I must share that this is not my first Dr. Due commencement. I was honored to attend the Florida A&M ceremony where the other half of this love story, Dr. Patricia Stevens Due, received the Doctor of Humane Letters from our sister land-grant institution. It is my extreme privilege to share the introduction of the letter from Leon County Jail. On January 20th, 2000, Governor Jeb Bush met with Florida House Representative Tony Hill of Jacksonville and State Senator Kendrick Meek of Miami in the office of Florida Lieutenant Governor Frank Brogan. The pair of legislative officials tried to convince the governor of Florida that implementation of his planned executive order called the One Florida Initiative should be delayed until public hearings could be heard. to give the citizens of Florida a sense that their input on the issue was being heard. Florida's African American community leaders in particular were concerned about three components of the One Florida initiative. The general concern that reforms to any affirmative action program demonstrated a lack of sensitivity on behalf of the government in making compensatory action for hundreds of years of official policies and laws which held African Americans back, the elimination of race and ethnicity as a factor in university admissions, and the introduction of the Talented 20 program, which professed to guarantee state university admission to the top 20% of students in every Florida high school senior class, but which many in Florida's communities of color saw as fewer seats for Black students in the state's institutions of higher learning. The governor's office claimed that even with the elimination of race and ethnicity as a factor in admissions, the Talented 20 program would result in a net increase in minority enrollment in the state university system. However, such pronouncements flew in the face of demonstrated decreases in minority enrollments in California, Texas, and Michigan schools after the initiation of programs designed to ignore race in college admissions. More specifically, the speed with which the governor was forced at the start of the program concerned many African Americans who predicted decreases in minority enrollments. Hill and Meek were asking the governor for time to convince their constituents that although there were concerns, compromise would eventually lead to a solution that all sides could be comfortable with. The governor was unmoved by the joint request for additional public comment on the issue and told Hill and Meek that his mind was made up. He closed their session with the remark, "If you think you're going to change my mind on this, you might as well send for some blankets." Hill and Meek accepted the challenge. They refused to leave the lieutenant governor's office and began a sit-in promising to stay until some agreement was reached on the hearings. A veteran of the Tallahassee sit-ins of the civil rights era flew in from Miami to attend a gathering in support of Hill and Meek's actions. Due commented that she and her husband, John, had gotten on the plane in Tallahassee because she heard that Florida Governor Jeb Bush said in reference to the legislators' occupation of the office suites that Capitol police officers should kick their asses out. Due replied, Governor Bush said he was going to kick our asses out of there. And we said, we're going to take our asses up there. When I heard about it, I was really annoyed. We called and made reservations to fly to Tallahassee. We just wanted to tell Meek and Hill how proud we were of them. When we got there, there was a press conference going on and we were invited to come and speak. And then they were meeting upstairs, so we were invited to go upstairs. That was when I publicly just told them how proud I was of them, because here were some young people who knew who they were and didn't mind letting other people know it. And I started telling them the story of the struggle. And I'm telling you, everybody was crying. Everybody was crying. The actions of Hill, Meek, and Due are representative of a centuries-old tradition of resistance, particular to North Florida, that has been overshadowed and underreported in popular rhetorical history. Florida has a rich historic tradition of Black activism resistance that has been left out of the overall history of Florida and America. It is a history shrouded in both inaccurate and non-reports of strength and courage against colonial oppression in the far and recent past by people of African descent on Florida shores. It's been 15 years since I've taken the time to read that closely, but I want to thank you, Dr. John Due, for your service, your sacrifice, and your love, which encouraged all of this work, which continues. Dr. Due always said, the struggle continues, and it does. Thank you so much for this opportunity to honor you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marta Weston and Stanley Richardson, and Marta for taking us back to the incredible words of Dr. Patricia Stevens Due. And we have a real treat for everyone who's joined us this evening, because we're going to get to see Patricia Stevens Due and John Due together during a 2011 event called An Evening with the Dues. But before I say that, because I'm a historian and a history professor, I can't go anywhere with giving out reading assignments and homework. And so for those of us watching this evening, I want to ask each of you to pick up a book called Freedom in the Family. Now, the Due family are very familiar with this book, Freedom in the Family, because it was co-written by none other than Patricia Stevens Due and Honorary Due, who's with us as well on the program. And Freedom in the Family is a wonderful account, a first-person account of what it was like to grow up in this remarkable family and have incredible parents like Patricia Stevens Due and John Dorsey Due. So get that book, Freedom in the Family. It's a wonderful introduction to the civil rights and human rights movement in Florida. And after this, the next clip that we play, and I'll talk just a little more about that, we're going to hear John Dorsey Due himself give his keynote, we'll call it his commencement address for us. But to get him kind of warmed up, again, we've decided to go back to a moment of time in 2011 when John traveled to Gainesville with his wife, Patricia Stevens Due. And they put on a show called An Evening with the Dues. And they held court for about 2 hours, regaling us with stories about half a century together in the movement. They answered questions, they offered comments, they stirred the waters, they caused trouble because they're lifetime troublemakers, right? They're never, John and Patricia have never been satisfied with resting on their laurels. And so we have a real treat for you tonight. And I want to also let you know that the entire program of An Evening with the Dues, like this program tonight, is accessible via the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program website. And you can just type in SPOHP or SPOHP in your browser. But without further delay, let's go back in time to 2011 with John Due and Patricia Stevens Due at An Evening with the Dues at the University of Florida.
We were paying attention. First and foremost to us, a family was important. I see I'm having to bend over a bit here.
Okay, let me move the chair a little bit.
He was always a gentleman. Thank you, honey.
Being facetious. So I like to call myself not as a civil rights lawyer, but a freedom movement lawyer. That's the difference. Because civil rights is always defined by the power structure as to what civil rights are. We are not in a post-racial society. We are still in a racial society, and we need to begin to move towards one, the human race.
Well, a little closer to home, I guess. We each have a 400-page FBI record, separate. Well, one advantage of John's record was that I found out where he was at certain times. The FBI knew more about his whereabouts. No, seriously.
I had done a tour in the United States Army, and I didn't tell them to assign me to special services, psychological warfare attached to the 82nd Airborne. Just because I had 3 years college, I was assigned to that unit. And that unit is about mental manipulation, about mental conditioning of the enemy, so that you can condition them to want to do the things you want them to do. And I began to say, you know, this is what America does with its own citizens. I would like to move on from the days of the sit-ins and the freedom rides to the kind of institutional racism that Stokely Carmichael talks about, which is that although there is no alleged intent to discriminate against you because of race, however, the practices and the policies of the institutions result in difference because it's a business necessity. It's not about race, allegedly. No peace, no justice. No peace, no justice. No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace.
Well, that was John and Patricia Stevens Due almost 10 years ago now, and we're getting ready for John's commencement address in just a few moments. But I just want to let folks know, because I know a lot of people in these events will join us in kind of midstream. Welcome to the Samuel Proctor Oral History Programs and the University of Florida's special ceremony this evening honoring Attorney John Dorsey Due, now a doctor in humane letters. John this evening has received the highest award that the University of Florida can possibly bestow. And we're here this evening to honor them, not just the life in the struggle that John and Patricia Stevens Due and their family have waged on our behalf, but also to think about where do we go from here? And I know this is one of John's favorite books of the civil rights movement, another homework assignment, if you will. Martin Luther King Jr.'s last final testament is what his wife called it, Chaos or Community. Where do we go from here? It's a book that John has frequently assigned to our students, and it's a book I want to commend to your attention. So without further delay, let's hear words of wisdom from tonight's honoree, Dr. John Dorsey Due. John, take it away.
All right. Freedom is not free, Paul.
Nope.
Thank you very much, Paul, for hard work. Thank you for your team. Thank you for University of Florida to continue the vision of not just Patricia, who I'm holding, because I'm holding her instead of having a stack of books. I'm holding her because she's the other part of do and do freedom law. Because do and do freedom law is more than about civil rights, it's about freedom law. And I accept a doctorate of humanities with my daughter, Attorney Janita Due, and my son-in-law, Mark Willoughby, and my grandson, Jackson Willoughby, and his sister, Devonna Willoughby. We all here to observe this occasion. And I want to say to you, Doctor, we've been on a journey, since 2009, but it seems like it's been a generation. But we still have work to do. And my acceptance of this doctorate is conditional. It's an acceptance to recognize that Attorney John Due has been a doctor of humanity with his wife, because the book that was discussed by you just a few minutes ago, Where Do We Go From Here, by Martin Luther King, the most important part of that book is the introduction by Fannie Lou Hamer, an activist a down-home activist that worked in the freedom movement back 60 years ago. She was in a meeting, Paul. A question was put to her, and this is described in the introduction. Fannie Lou Hamer, what has been your mission? Was your mission was to see equality with the white man and civil rights? And Paul, Dr. Martin Luther King wrote a beautiful book, but it was that few words she said in the introduction capsulized, where do we go from here? Because Fannie Lou Hamer said, equality with the white man, I don't want to go down that low. I want to hold him by my hand and bring him up with me so we all can be free and become all we can be. And I'm telling you, man, that was also Patricia. You see Patricia being dragged by the police, which was part of the freedom movement, but she also had the same vision that it was beyond civil rights or Negro rights. It was about human rights. And that's the condition I accept this doctorate of humanities, is to recognize more than civil rights. Patricia and I was about human rights for everybody become the best they can be. Now, before I go any further, Paul and University of Florida, I thank the president, University of Florida. I thank you. I thank the faculty to award me this doctorate of humanities. But we are in serious trouble as we move further in the 21st century. So Patricia and I was part of the civil rights movement 60 years ago. But the problem you have today has changed into a new racism. And I had described this with Attorney John Dita, as being a problem of, I call it, what do I call it? New white politic. New white politic. And also a new black politic. Now, let me give you a few minutes. You can ask questions. What do I mean by new white politic and the new black politic? The new white politic is a problem where many of our African Americans have moved on to take advantage of the civil rights movement and have become new whites. Then Fannie Lou Hamer, recognizing this, decided she was going to be a new black politic. Now, what do I mean by new black politic? Well, it means that yes, we're in a racial condition, but it's a post-racial condition of the 21st century. And it is a condition I call new whites when I call colored people act as if they're white. I would like to recommend to your students the book by the psychiatrist, Dr. Fanon. He's an African psychologist, Frantz Fanon, and he wrote the book, Black Skin and White Mask, where there is a condition of African Americans become colored white people and hurting other Black people, particularly in the criminal justice system. So that is your assignment, Doctor, to give to your students about what it means to be a new Black, is to follow Fannie Lou Hamer and become a doctor of humanity, to help everybody become the best they can be, not just for civil rights, but for community, mental health, and public safety. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. When I was 4 years old, Aunt Edith, who was my caretaker at the time, she took me aside one day when I was 4 years old. Johnny, you have to learn to be safe in this world because you're not safe. Now, 4 years old, I didn't know what she meant, but she took the family Bible and turned to a page, and there was a picture of a white man with a long beard and clothes, beard going to the ground, with lightning in his hand. And I knew what was lightning was because she was telling me during a day in Greencastle, Indiana, when there was a thunderstorm and there was thunder and lightning. And I had incorporated her warning to me beginning in school when they began to desegregate schools in Terre Haute, Indiana. By that time, I was living with my grandmother. And I noticed that most African Americans were seeking to hide, to sit in the back. But I remember what my Aunt Melville said. She was, Johnny chose to sit in front. Johnny chose to engage himself with the teacher. And pretty soon I began to win. And this is what our African Americans need to learn. You have to win. Eventually, by the time I was in high school, I had a trombone. And you know where the people who play the trombone, where do they march? Where in the band are they? They right in front. So that has always been my game to survive as an African American as we move forward in the 21st century. You have any questions before I go further? Because I will want to talk about what it means to be new white after that.
Well, John, we'll do a Q&A. You'll lead a Q&A a bit later in the program after the testimonials.
Okay. So, okay, and then I can discuss what I mean by the new white politic. And this is, again, where African Americans, I like to say, act like they were colored, and counter to the new black politic, they seek to be traitors to their own race. They seek, material comfort and other conditions of life. So you can ask me questions if you can, as to what I mean by, as we move further in the discussion as to what it means to be a doctor of humanities, so that we can face the reality of the new racism of the 21st century. So Paul, I'll give it to you.
Thank you, Dr. Due. Thank you, John, for those words of wisdom. And just to echo what Dr. Due is saying, we will have a section after the testimonials and after Oliver Telusma's original poem coming up, where you will be able to ask questions of Attorney Dr. John Due. And you can use the sidebar I'm looking at the actual question bar on YouTube right now. So a bit later in the program, we'll have an extensive Q&A session with Attorney Dr. John Due. So be thinking of questions that you want to pose a bit later, kind of let it percolate. Now, we have a real treat coming up, because we have a series of reflections and video testimonials of individuals who talk about, John, the impact that you've had in their lives. And a lot of the names will be familiar to you. There's some friends in the struggle that you've known for 60 years, people like Dan Harmeling. But I also want to share with you the fact that we're going to be hearing a lot of testimonials this evening, and they're relatively short, but they're from students that you have sat down with, John, one-on-one, and given them wake-up calls, given them a kind of a moral compass. A lot of these students are, when you spoke with them, were pre-law students, and you help them and you help them matriculate to Duke Law, to Howard Law, to Florida A&M Law, to Harvard Law. And so they wanted the opportunity, John, to express their thanks to you tonight. And if we would have been able to do it in person, of course, we all would have flown into Gainesville, but we're doing the next best thing. And so everyone out in the listening audience, each of the video testimonials, each of the speakers will introduce themselves. We're going to start with a person who I'm especially proud of. Jennifer Telusma is a UF honors graduate. She took just about every seminar, John, that I had to offer at the University of Florida. She sat in the front row. Every time I would ask a question as a history professor, Jennifer's hand would shoot straight up. Just so incredibly sharp, and wrote a wonderful senior honors thesis, matriculated to Duke Law, aced it, and is now a successful practicing attorney. So we'll begin with the video testimonials, and we're going to hear about 10 of them. Again, they're relatively short. And then after that, we're going to make another special presentation, John, another big surprise for this evening. But let's kind of sit back for a moment and take a break and listen to some video testimonials in honor of Dr. Attorney John Due.
As an undergraduate at the University of Florida, while studying voting rights, I discovered that John Due and his wife Patricia were one of many local foot soldiers who faced hostility on a near daily basis in order to usher in a new generation of change for Black Floridians. John Due was intentional about his work and about his contributions. Nothing I can say about Mr. Due can justify how he went about his work. So I'm going to go ahead and read an excerpt from an oral history interview he gave to the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. John Due said, quote, "I use the word freedom movement because I'm a lawyer, and I don't like to use the word civil rights in relation to Judy or Patricia, Judy being a former colleague of Mr. Due's and Patricia being his late wife, who were both activists as well, because what they were about was beyond the law. Because the law, basically, is part of the power structure. When they were involved, they said the law must be subordinate to human rights, humanity, and if it's not abiding to humanity, we have to resist. We have to change it. They were trying to save humanity. Tonight, we honor Mr. Due, who spent a lifetime working to try to save humanity, to resist the law in any condition that put human rights second. I can think of no one else who deserves this honor more than Mr. Due. Congratulations, Mr. Due.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sharon Austin. I'm a professor of political science at UF, and I had the honor of submitting a letter for John Due for the award that he's being presented tonight. And I just wanted to point out just some of the excerpts from the letter and be as brief as possible. I want to first of all congratulate Mr. Due for his many accomplishments throughout his life, and also to thank him for the many things that he's accomplished that made it possible for people like me to be able to work at the University of Florida, where I've been very pleased to work for the last 20 years. So I just want to read a few things from the letter and be as brief as possible. So what I wrote to the members of the committee was, first of all, quote unquote, "It is my honor and pleasure to endorse the nomination of Attorney John Dorsey Due, Jr. for the honorary degree of Doctor of Humane Letters at the University of Florida. Both Mr. Due and his wife, the late Patricia Stevens Due, were civil rights activists in Florida for several decades. Both made the state of Florida a better place for everyone because of their protests against injustices and their dedicated commitments to equality for all people. In this letter, I would like to discuss the efforts of John Due because of his activism that made it possible for people like me to achieve the things I've achieved in life." So I'm not going to read the entire letter. I'm just going to try to just read a summary. I then go into his background and all the things that he has accomplished in Florida, especially beginning in the early 1960s when he attended FAMU in Tallahassee, and in the years after that, and serving as an attorney in Mississippi during 1964 Freedom Summer Campaign. And I'm very proud of that because my parents are from Mississippi. They were born and raised in the Mississippi Delta in Tunica County, and I also still have family that live there. So I'll just skip ahead to the very last paragraph. His contributions in Florida were as significant as his contributions in other states. He's argued numerous federal civil rights cases that have addressed a number of civil rights issues. In our state, he has also been a community organizer who has protested on behalf of community policing, sanitation workers, the impoverished, Haitian refugees, and union workers. In addition, he has been a legal advocate for welfare rights, educational equality, immigrant rights, prisoners' rights, public school desegregation, and several other issues. For all of these reasons, I enthusiastically endorse his nomination. So again, I only wish that we could all have been together at the graduation ceremony to personally see Mr. Due as he receives this award. But I want to congratulate you. And again, I want to send my heartfelt thanks and thank you for everything that you've done for me and for the people of Florida and for people all over the United States. So thank you all and have a good evening.
Hello, John. Dan Harmeling here. It's good to be involved in this tribute to you, and I just want to let everybody know that you and I go way back to 1963. That's 57 years ago. We met in Tallahassee, and then, of course, we also had civil rights activities that brought us to Ocala and also to St. Augustine, and as well as here in Gainesville. There was so much that went on then, but and other people are talking about it. But I also want to mention that then I left for D.C. This was in 1966, and we lost touch with each other. Our families, of course, our families were young then, but they were getting in place. There were children being born. So then we reconnected in 1991. So after so many years, we were a part of the memorial for Judith Benninger Brown, and that happened here in Gainesville, the civil rights and feminist leader Judith. So then we had great times together, and of course everyone knows about your leadership in the civil rights movement as well as Patricia's leadership. But here's something that people might not know. You have carpentry skills. In fact, Patricia does too. And even though I had a little more experience doing carpentry work, the three of us got together and we built wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, first in your home in Miami, and then later on when you moved to Tallahassee, we did the same thing again. And we did this, and I shared a picture of you and I in the midst of this activity. You and Pat had thousands of extensive library of African-American books, and it certainly is a collection that certainly is going to be valued in the future. What I want to do now is just let everyone know we always spent many days and evenings together. First, Pat and I would talk about your three daughters and my four sons and how things were going with them. And then, of course, you and I spent late into the night our discussions about the civil rights movement, what's going on, what's been done, and what we think the future might be like. The one thing I want to mention, too, before I finish this up is that there are many things that people don't know. And one is that you were a time riding a bicycle. You were riding a bicycle in Miami from your house to the commuter train terminal, and then you could take the train to your job in Miami. But you got into pretty good athletic shape, and I just want to let people know that, John, you have to remember this. You and I would do some jogging together. Yeah, we did. But anyway, that's in our past. What I want to do now is finish up and just say congratulations, John. This is a great honor, and you're so most deserving of it. I want to thank you. Your really warm friendship. It's been an inspiration. There's so many things that I can say in addition to this, but all I can say is I look forward to the future and all the times we can get together. There's much more to be done. So again, thanks a lot, John, and take care. Bye.
Hi, my name is Kasamba Kukai, and I am now a senior at UF and a staff member at SPOHP. I will be graduating in the fall. Today, for this occasion, I will be reading this letter of recommendation Professor Ortiz wrote of Mr. John Doe. John Doe eschewed financial success in order to promote the human rights of all during the most challenging decades in American history. A contemporary of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., John Doe provided pro bono legal assistance to civil rights activists who were unjustly incarcerated during the St. Augustine freedom movement that brought Dr. King to Florida. Attorney Doe went to St. Augustine in the spring of 1964 to lend legal assistance to the embattled civil rights movement that had become the focal point of the world's attention. It was in St. Augustine that Attorney Doe developed the tactic of moving civil rights cases to federal courts to temper the biased decisions that were frequently made in Jim Crow states. This legal strategy was subsequently copied by civil rights attorneys throughout the South. In subsequent decades, John Doe was the unacknowledged legal mind behind key gains in equality, school integration, labor, and civil rights in Miami, Tallahassee, St. Petersburg, Fort Lauderdale, Gainesville, Quincy, and many other Florida towns. Attorney Doe's work with Janet Reno and the Community Relations Board in Miami has become a model for what has become known as restorative justice movement, involving community policing, a strategy of collaborative partnerships among law enforcement and communities they serve to reduce crime and fear and promote trust. Mr. Doe explained the restorative justice as a counter to the phenomena of mass incarceration in a piece he wrote for CNN.
My name is Charity Kelly, and I'll be reading the third portion of Dr. Ortiz's recommendation for Attorney Doe. John Doe is not a graduate of the University of Florida. However, he has worked directly with and inspired hundreds of University of Florida students and alumni by being a guest lecturer during the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program's annual Mississippi Freedom Project. Every engagement has been awe-inspiring. Many of the students we take on this trip are pre-law candidates, and several have dedicated their careers to pursuing public interests, civil rights, and immigration rights laws after spending a day with Attorney Due. UF alumni continue to credit John Doe with inspiring them to pursue meaningful legal careers. Our visit with Mr. Due in July 2018 on our way to the Delta was especially memorable, as Juliet Barbera, a UF graduate student leader, recalled. In what was surely 90-degree weather, Attorney Due stood in front of the crowd in a suit with a poster and a milk crate of books, ready to engage us in a lecture. I am honored to have had the opportunity to be taught and introduced to the Florida civil rights movement by Attorney Due. I hope future generations of students and Floridians will continue to learn from Attorney Due. In closing, I believe that Attorney Dorsey Due, is deserving of the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters at the University of Florida. Furthermore, I believe that the bestowing of this degree on John Doe at this crisis moment in history of civil rights world will send a clear message that the University of Florida stands for equal justice for all. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you have questions about this letter. I remain sincerely yours, Dr. Paul Ortiz, Professor of History, University Term Professor, Affiliated Faculty. Thank you. And congratulations, Attorney Due, or shall I say Dr. Due.
Hi, my name is Nicole Yap, and I graduated from the University of Florida in 2018. While I was a student, I was involved in the Mississippi Freedom Project at SPOHP. During my junior year, I was a student researcher for the summer MFP fieldwork research trip, and I served as project coordinator for MFP during my senior year. Because of MFP, I had the opportunity to meet John Doe and learn about his lifelong dedication to social justice activism. Mr. Due's civil rights work has been transformative for the state of Florida. Hearing about his work with the Tallahassee bus boycotts, SNCC, the Congress of Racial Equality, and his more recent work with restorative justice and the elimination of mass incarceration was an invigorating experience. I will be starting law school this fall, and Mr. Due's civil rights work inspires me. He has made a difference in the lives of so many people, and I hope to make the same kind of difference with my legal career. John Doe is an amazing individual who has lived his life serving mankind. I am so happy that UF has awarded Mr. Due with an honorary doctorate in humane letters. The honor is so well deserved.
Hello, my name is Dr. Justin Dunavant. I am a former SPOHP alum, currently postdoctoral fellow here at Vanderbilt University. I just want to say congratulations first and foremost to Attorney Due, now Dr. John Doe. It's been a long time coming, but I'm thankful that this honor was finally able to be recognized, and you're more than deserving of it. I first met John Doe, I want to say my first year at the University of Florida back in 2010. And it was actually the first public event I attended at the University of Florida. John Doe was sitting in Pew Hall next to his wife, Patricia Stevens Due, on a panel that was held by SPOHP. And I had just come my first year as a graduate student, and it was the first sort of civil rights oriented talk that I had seen on campus. And from there, I heard the testimony of Patricia Stevens Due. I heard John Doe recount some of the events that happened in St. Augustine, Florida. And I knew then that I needed to work for SPOHP and to continue to engage with these people that were doing this powerful work. There was so much to learn from their experiences. And I think what was most invigorating was knowing that he continued this legacy on forward and continued to do this work. From then, I continued to work with SPOHP, continued to participate in the Mississippi trips every year. And every year we used to get to see John Doe, usually in Tallahassee, Florida. He would come in from Quincy, and we would have long conversations with students. He would sit with us and talk to us about his experiences, about what it was like organizing during the movement, and then also what it was like to just serve in that capacity as a lawyer during the civil rights era. So I'm honored and I'm thankful that you're finally getting your flowers, as they say, for the work that you do. I remember the last time we met, you actually gave me a copy of the book Freedom in the Family. And I think you had a couple signed copies on the end of it, but you thankfully autographed it yourself. And I'll just read the language that you put in here. You put, "To Justin Dunavant, to a cool brother who is going to help you, Patricia, to bring your movement to the third generation, by John Doe, Esquire." And I think that was powerful because I know that even though you wrote this book to me, I think you wrote it really to your wife with the hopes that I would be listening and being able to help to carry this work forward. So with that said, I thank you for everything you've done, and I hope that you continue to do well, and I'll try to continue to honor both your name, the name of Patricia Stevens Due, and the rest of the legacy that you've left with us. Thank you. All right, now time for a little bonus footage. Those of you who know John Doe know that he's very active on social media, and particularly Facebook. And if you've ever received a Facebook message from him, you know he likes to hit the caps lock button on his keyboard while he types messages. I think we've all received glorious messages about continuing the struggle and applauding us for the work that we do in the movement, and constantly reminding us for all that it is that we need to do to keep it going forward. And I always appreciate that about John Doe, that he never lets us slip up, and he always reminds us what it is that we need to be doing. In addition to that, I also remember attending the 80th birthday. I was sitting next to Dan Harmeling up in Tallahassee, Florida, and I can say it was one of the best birthday parties I'd been to for anybody. So I was honored to be there, and food was good, the company was good. Reverend Steele, I believe it was, or one of his relatives was playing the guitar, and it was definitely a memorable moment. So I'm glad that I was able to share that moment with you and your family, and I'm thankful for all the opportunities we've been able to share and learn from. Again, congratulations, Dr. Due.
Hi, my name is Caroline Vickers, and I am a 2012 graduate of the University of Florida. Currently, I am an attorney and a bar exam coach. First, I want to congratulate Attorney John Doe on receiving an honorary doctorate from the University of Florida. It is truly an honor to give back to you for all of your hard work and paving the way for people like me to become attorneys. You are truly a living legend. I remember meeting you and Mrs. Due as a student at the University of Florida. I remember being in awe that members of the freedom movement were in my classroom. You shared your experiences with us, but most of all, you charged us with the duty to continue the necessary work. Thank you for showing us how ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for creating the blueprint for my generation to continue the freedom movement. Again, congratulations.
First met John Doe in the summer of 2014, and I had been familiar with the work of his wife, Patricia Stevens Due, in the civil rights movement, particularly in Tallahassee, and it was phenomenal to actually meet John Doe for the first time. When I first met him, actually, we drove together from Natchez, Mississippi, up to the Delta of Mississippi together. And in that time period, he taught me so much about just Black history, legal history in the United States. And I think the thing I took away from John Doe was that even no matter what stage that he was in his life, he always was an active learner. He never was afraid to reconsider his beliefs. He never was afraid to read something new. He, in the 60s and 70s, he still was dedicated to improving his analysis of the world, his analysis of the role of lawyers in the legal system and the oppression of Black people, and also the avenues within the legal profession that he saw that we could actually measure out or eke out a measure of freedom and equality through the legal system. And from his work in Macomb, Mississippi, where he ran against the state, essentially, where the FBI actually tracked him down. He shared the story of how the FBI tracked him down and how the intervention of a local DA saved his life once. In the interview that I conducted with him as he was conducting legal work for civil rights activists in Mississippi in the South at the time period, in the 1960s. So John Doe was an amazing person. Every time that I got to meet with him, I was always impressed by him. I always learned so much from him. He always actually blew me away. He's an elder that I always respect. I always will respect, and now he's an ancestor that we all should respect, and we all should have due reverence for. He gave so much to the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, which I'm thankful for. I know that the staff there are thankful for. He was instrumental in my graduate, PhD career. So I'm just thankful and lucky that I got a chance to meet Attorney John Doe and be a part of his life. And just want to say blessings and peace to his family. And I'm glad that he's being celebrated in this way by University of Florida. And he deserves so much more. So I can just say for myself that I love John Doe. I appreciate John Doe. And he's an ancestor now that I'll always show reverence towards.
Thank you, Professor Hosby, and those wonderful reflections and testimonials. And let's all just take a moment to kind of pause and think about the cumulative power of these amazing young people and their testimonials. And yes, Dan Harmling, I'm including you in that category as well, because all of these were incredible University of Florida students. It was such an honor to be able to work with them. They brought fire and passion to the University of Florida, thanks to their parents, their elders. But when they met John Doe, something extra happened. And I want to suggest that all of them, Justin Hosby, Justin Donovan, Nicole Yap, Caroline Vickers, and all the testimonials that you heard from, all of those former students of the University of Florida came to UF ready. But John Doe gave them something extra. He gave them a spark. He gave them some wisdom from decades in the movement. And each of them had told us over and over again what a difference, what a positive, amazing impact John Dorsey Due and Patricia Stevens Due had on their lives. And so I'm just so grateful. And I just feel very happy right now and joyful to see so many of our former students at UF return for the evening to give this wonderful testimony. Well, in a few minutes, we're going to actually hear from John Doe's family, and his family are going to have an opportunity to offer their reflections. And we're also working up towards a Q&A with John. So again, think about questions that you might want to ask, or observations you may want to pose. Keep in mind that we're actually recording this event, and the entire event will be available through the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program website. And we would invite you to watch it over and over again. And I'm sure that we're going to also produce a special DVD as well. And I want, again, to give major props and thanks to the executive producer of this evening's program, Deborah Hendricks, right now. Deborah's behind the scenes, kind of manning the all of the switches and knobs to keep the program going. But now it's my honor to actually reintroduce a wonderful current student at the University of Florida and a current staff member, Rachel. And Rachel, you saw earlier as part of the octet playing the Freedom Song suite. And Rachel and a group of staff people at the Proctor program put together a zine. And John, these zines are very popular among millennials and teenagers. And the zine is, you and I are talking about books. The zine is kind of a way to get, as I look at it, kind of get younger people really interested in a topic so that it kind of draws them in. And they might be interested in learning more about a particular topic and even reading something longer. But the zine is breaking down complex ideas and really making them very concise and very accessible, and using artistry skills to do so. So without further delay, let's hear Rachel talking about this wonderful zine. And keep in mind, this is an original production dedicated to Dr. John Doe and created for this evening, but we're going to use our digital platform to promote the zine and get it out there to high school students and to others.
Hi, my name is Rachel Heisa, and I work for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. We at the Oral History Program want to make our oral histories as accessible as possible to all ages, which resulted in the creation of the John Doe Oral History Zine. A zine is just short for magazine, and they usually include hand-drawn illustrations. Several of us at the Oral History Program have been conceiving lesson plans and helping teachers select oral history interviews to use in classrooms. This zine, on top of being a visual celebration of attorney, and now Dr. John Doe, was conceived as an educational supplement to oral history used in classrooms. It can be used along with discussions of how people fought for civil rights in Florida, in the past and today. I think that including our quotes with drawings and pictures is a good way to engage people in oral history, especially younger people. Zines are pretty popular among younger folks today, kind of along the same lines as graphic novels and comics. You can access the zine through the link on the Evening with John Doe Facebook page. You can request a physical copy of this zine by contacting the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. You can call 352-392-7168 or email tamarraj@ufl.edu. I created the zine by selecting quotes from Attorney Doe's oral history interviews housed in the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program's archives. We are lucky enough to have several interviews with John Doe, and we are very thankful for his time and recollections. Once I selected quotes, I drew some illustrations that I thought would fit the theme. For instance, John Doe gives a great description of Patricia Stevens Doe, his wife. He said, during a FAMU football game, "Everybody was turning their head, and everybody is looking at this young lady, black young lady, wearing dark glasses, orange leather jacket, and boots." I was struck by the detail of his recollections, but also how much care and love Attorney Doe expressed about his wife throughout his interviews. It was really sweet. I wanted to make sure I captured Patricia Stevens Doe's kind of renegade spirit in the illustration as well. I also think that the fact that Patricia Stevens Doe was so young when she became an activist will be a great way to connect to young adult audiences. Mrs. Doe was only 13 when she started to fight for civil rights. She joined student civil rights groups at FAMU when she was only 20, and she staged her famous jail-in at the Leon County Jail when she was only 21. John Doe himself was also a student when he joined the struggle. Young adult readers today, including myself, can read the zine, learn about the Does, and think about exactly what we can do to advance equality in the United States. You can find the interviews quoted in this zine and more online at the University of Florida Digital Collections. Just type ufdc.ufl.edu/ORAL into your search bar, and you can search with keywords our collections to find hundreds of wonderful interviews with community leaders, civil rights activists, and so much more. Thank you all for your time, and please enjoy the rest of An Evening with John Doe.
Yes. Hello. Okay. I want to introduce to everybody the people in my family that's part of Patricia and myself. Janita Doe, who's with CNN, Mark Willoughby, a businessman, but I would like to introduce the next generation. Come forward. Behind me is my grandson, Jackson Doe Willoughby. Also behind him is Giovanna Doe Willoughby. What Patricia and I did was almost 70 years ago, but it doesn't mean a thing unless we continue this freedom struggle and to the next generation. I had a moment with Jackson Due Willoughby one day about what do he believes is the next step in the freedom movement. And there was a song that he introduced me to, and I want Jackson to describe this song.
Well, the song is All of Me by John Legend, and he just like talks about his like love for his wife, I believe.
But it really talks about how you have to give all of yourself,
right,
in order to make changes occur. That was Patricia, who at 6 years old had a father from Atlanta, a stepfather, who complained about the fact that the principal of that school in West Palm Beach did not go by lesson plans. And of course, being fearful for his job, he didn't want to complain about it. The state of Florida requires teachers to have lesson plans, but not in West Palm Beach because the majority of the population were Haitians who were imported, and therefore they didn't think, power structure didn't think they needed any education. But the Patricia, at an early age, 6 years old, knew about petitions, and she went around in her school to gather a petition by fellow students and had her mother. Now that's Patricia for you, isn't it? She had her mother to take her to the superintendent's office, and that was changed. So that young people have power to make changes in society.
Right. So Paul, on behalf of your grandchildren, we want to let you know how proud of you we are and how fortunate we are to have you as a role model of someone who can change the world. Thank you for teaching us that the struggle continues.
All right, the struggle continues and you will carry on the struggle. So when I'm laying my casket and you come and look, I can open my eyes and say, carry on, grandson. Power to the people. Freedom is not free. Okay, now.
And Dad?
Again, thank you, University of Florida, for this doctorate in humanities. But as I was told Paul, thank you, Paul, for the work you did for me to be honored. But thank you, University of Florida. But the struggle continues, and my life work has always been to serve and carry on the work of being a doctor of humanities to help heal America to become the best it can be.
And Dad, listen, Honorary will make some remarks in a minute on behalf of our generation. But I wanted to just say something. I am so moved by all of the testimonials from the young people we've heard from today. And I just want to let you know, you have always been a source of inspiration to me. I mean, these last few weeks have been very difficult. And I remember feeling such hopelessness in the aftermath of Ahmaud Arbery's, lynching and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. And I just, part of my hopelessness was this feeling that all of your hard work, all of Mom's hard work, all of the hard work of all the foot soldiers just seemed to be in vain, and that we were in the same place you were 60 years ago. And so I called you very upset, and you basically said to me, quoting Langston Hughes, life ain't no crystal stair.
That's right.
And you reminded me that your spirit and your conviction that our human race can prevail above all of this sickness and all of this racism just was so inspiring to me. And so I thank you for that, because I know many of us really rely on the kind of spirit that you and Mom have shared with us to keep us going. So thank you. And I'll now turn this over to Stana.
The Honorary.
That was beautiful. Lower your head so we can see your whole face, my dear. I want everyone to be able to see you. So yeah, there we go. There's my sister. So thank you all, everyone. That was beautiful, Janita. Dad, you were doing amazing. I wish I could be in the room with both of you, all of us together, really. But thank you so much to the University of Florida, Dr. Paul Ortiz, the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, Dan Harmeling, all of the Margaret Weston, all the testimonials from students and the beautiful music. I've been in tears for much of this tribute, and I'm awed, even anew, at how much impact my father's life and work have had outside of our house. So thank you so much for this ceremony, and congratulations, Dr. John Dorsey Due Jr. You had such influence on all of us, as you know, Janita, and also our other sister, Lydia Grice. We all knew, being raised in that house with you and Mom, Patricia Stevens Due, that we were in the presence of superheroes. We deeply understood how your courageous work in the 1960s helped create a brighter future, not just for us, but really for all Americans. And your example had so much influence on me that I briefly flirted with going to law school to be a lawyer, like both of my sisters, but luckily you also encouraged me in the arts. So now I'm a novelist instead of that. And as you know, we have taken many trips to Marianna, Florida together recently, as you were my silent collaborator and co-researcher for the novel I just finished writing, The Reformatory, based on the horrors at the Dozier School for Boys, where we learned after Mom passed away that she had a great uncle who died there, Robert Stevens, in 1937. So Dad, you attended meetings. You were there for the beginning of the exhumation of the remains at the school in Marianna. You helped me construct a scene in my book in a Jim Crow era courthouse based on your experiences in the 1960s with Jim Crow era judges. But I'll close by saying what's even more impressive to me than your work in the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, or even the 1990s is what I'm hearing today of how your work has continued into your elder years. Here, what an example you are at the age of 85. You're still so active. You bring so much light to so many young people's lives. I've gotten testimonials on Twitter from a civil rights attorney that you also mentored. It just never ends. So you've never lost your fire for change. You never get discouraged. You do the work with humor, with single-minded passion and focus, and with an open heart toward everyone. But no one will love you as much as we do, your children. So thank you so much, Dad, for everything.
Thank you. And the struggle continues in the next generation. Power to the people. Struggle continues in the next.
Thank you to Honorary, Janita, Lydia, and members of John Due's wonderful family. And tonight is really all about family, community, lives in the struggle, learning. The struggle never ends. The struggle for education, for equality, for justice, the struggle, the anti-lynching struggles, the struggles for freedom really never end. We are gearing up now towards moving towards the final part of our program, which is going to feature a question and answer session with attorney Dr. John Dorsey Due, Jr. But before that, we have a very special presentation to give to you tonight. Oliver Telusma is a graduate of the University of Florida, and he's currently a Juris Doctorate candidate at Florida A&M University College of Law in Orlando. Before that, Oliver Telusma was a staff member at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. You know, just like the other students that you've heard give testimony, Oliver had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with Attorney Due 3 or 4 years ago on those Mississippi trips. And Oliver was actually the co-coordinator for one of the Mississippi Freedom Project trips, John. And John, you may not remember this, but when Oliver first met you, it was in the home of none other than Mrs. Laura Dixie. And Mrs. Laura Dixie's name is a name, if you're familiar, those of you out there with the Tallahassee bus boycott, a historic turning point in the history of the civil rights movement. Laura Dixie was one of the rank and file organizers of that boycott. I interviewed Mrs. Dixie in the summer of 1994 when I was a graduate student at Duke University. And in later years, Mrs. Dixie adopted generations of my students. And whenever we passed through Tallahassee on our way to Mississippi or Louisiana or any other place to do oral histories, Mrs. Dixie insisted that we stopped at her house for a lunch, which would usually be prepared by her son, Sam Jr. And this is where, John, this is where Oliver Telusma actually met you first. And you were giving us a lecture about the freedom movement in Mrs. Laura Dixie's living room. And when Mrs. Laura Dixie passed away a few years ago, the Reverend Dr. Holmes at Bethel Baptist called her the mother of the movement in Tallahassee. And it was through Mrs. Laura Dixie who Oliver actually met John Due for the first time. So Oliver earned his BA in political science at the University of Florida in 2018, where he worked as a research coordinator for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. He is currently a Juris Doctorate candidate at Florida A&M University College of Law in Orlando, Florida. And let's hear what Oliver Telusma has to share with us tonight.
Hi, my name is Oliver Telusma. I'm a rising 3L at the Florida A&M University College of Law in Orlando, Florida. I was formerly a research coordinator and undergraduate research coordinator at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program under Dr. Paul Ortiz. Today I'll be reciting one of my spoken word poems in honor of the life and legacy of the living legend, Attorney John Due. I just wanted to know, what in the world are some of these leaders doing? 6 months into 2020, we understand why these movements are needed because people are being treated as equal. I mean, come on. Keystone XL and Dabble wasn't the first time that the United States has piped indigenous people. Do you hear? Their tummies rumbling. There's a difference between hungry for power versus working to feed the hungry, but regardless, you're eating good. If you can buy an election with old money, I'm talking about when public education becomes a joke because they're buying up public schools with DeVos and Coke money. To condition our kids to depend on dope and Coke money. To parties behind private prison bars that are funded with Joe money. Because we're navigating a broken system. Broke with no money is no power for the people because more power means more money. It's just funny how they want me to flip this cold flow but don't want our people to stack cold money. There are problematic people within the movement that like to assess your worth by how much is in your pocket. It doesn't make me feel better when it's a black man on TV asking me how much is in my wallet. It makes me feel better that people stop when Congress tells them to stop it. Me fighting that issue was the reason why I used to think that I might be the second black man to occupy the Oval Office, but I'm not a young Barack talking politics, I'm just Oliver talking liberation. It's two different conversations. Like, how are you saying that you're outspeaking me when we're having two different conversations, but it's all good? Because I'm fighting for the kids whose roads ain't even paved in their own neighborhood. So if you're stressed or fretting, that Dr. King was the end to understand that he was the genesis. And last time I checked, the Bible's got 65 other books across 2 testaments. That means the marginalized are set to inherit these benefits. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. But sometimes we as the meek need to sit down and assess our self-worth. It can't be because Sabrina lost her son that we should have to hurt that tree, had to bury Trayvon first. When we understand that, we'll be in a better place. And I believe that we won't settle for petty reforms and start making meaningful change. But until we reach that day, we're just going to keep marching away. I just want to start by saying thank you to Attorney John Doe. The first time I met him, we had taken a group photo out in front of his family steps, and he said, "Oh, so you want to go to law school?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm thinking about law school, feeling myself a little bit." And he said, "Maybe you think about corporate law." And I understand. After the conversation I just had with him, the interview that I just had with him, there's no way that I could think of something other than continuing this fight for our people, for my people. So thank you, Attorney Due. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your writing. Thank you for your experience, your blood, your sweat, and your tears. I continue to honor you, and thank you for having me be a part of this celebration. Blessings.
Thank you, Oliver Telusma, University of Florida graduate, who really did amazing spoken word poetry here in Gainesville, mentored and taught a lot of other spoken word poets. And Oliver combines this passion for social justice and the law with poetry and art, and he kind of brings them all together. So again, it makes me so joyful to see Oliver again, as if he was just back in the classroom with us. So we're gearing up for the Q&A with John Doe. And so if you have questions, you want me to read to Dr. Doe, I am geared up on the sidebar, looking at the sidebar right now. As we kind of gather our thoughts, and John and I are just going to start doing what we do. Now, I haven't shared this with you yet, but John Doe sometimes calls me late at night. What do I mean by late at night? Sometimes, as John can tell you, that could be midnight, it could be 1 a.m., and we just kind of talk back and forth. And we talk about the most exciting topics I can think about. Foremost, how do we get free? What is freedom? What is liberation? And John has already mentioned this remarkable group of writers, and we've talked about Frantz Fanon. We've talked about many hours Patricia Stephens Due and the work that she did. We've talked about Fannie Lou Hamer. We've talked about Stokely Carmichael. We've talked about John's work in Macomb. And so I wanted to just share, kind of get things started by having a conversation with John, and then we'll kind of work in questions from the audience. But I also want to pause as well to let you know that we're recording the entire program. And so if you've just dialed in, this is an evening with John Doe. John has received, formally has received his honorary doctorate in humane letters. And so now he can add doctor to his many other great titles and use that in his life work. We've heard incredible video testimonials from former students who were inspired to go into law, into history, into anthropology, and into liberation. We've heard original music compositions. We heard a wonderful original poem by the poet laureate of Alachua County, E. Stanley Richardson. And so it's just been a great evening so far. And John, I think we're going to wrap up about 8:30 because we don't want to keep you all night. We know that now that you're a doctor of humane letters, you probably have other engagements, right? But let's go and kind of get it started, John. And, you know, some of the late night conversations you and I've had in Gainesville or in Mississippi or in Tallahassee. And like, what have you been reading or rereading lately during this era of Black Lives Matter? You know, I know you mentioned earlier Dr. King's Chaos or Community. What are like some other like key texts that you think that we should really visit or revisit during this moment of crisis?
I really think it's important to look at the last book again by Dr. King. Where do we go from here? Community or chaos? And that is an important question as we look at current events today in 2020. It seems that we are in a condition of chaos today. Chaos. And it is important today, 2020, to understand that we are in a new century, Paul. We're no longer in the 20th century that was devoted to civil rights. We're not in the 19th century that involved the Civil War and the failure of Reconstruction. We're not in the 17th and 16th century when America was taken by the English to be a prison colony. We don't want to really think about that. That the intent of the English in seizing America that nobody wanted to go to because they had the Indians there, and make it a prison colony. And this has become part of our subconscious today. We still think America is a prison colony, although we don't admit it. So that's why when I was invited to accept this doctorate, I realized I didn't want to talk about civil rights as if we are in the 20th century, Paul. We're in the 21st century where our problems have escalated into a different condition other than equal rights. And Stanley Richardson hit it right on the head. We said, I ain't trying to be equal to that dumb, stupid cracker. I want to take him by the hand and bring him up, you know, with us so we can make this a better America. Now,
Well, John, yeah.
Language,
yeah.
but the language in the introduction.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, you mentioned something that a lot of Americans don't know and are embarrassed of when they find out this, and the fact that this country, this region, was founded by the English as a prison colony, as a penal colony. And there's so much effort to kind of cover that up. But it connects, I think you're suggesting to us, it really connects to mass incarceration, does it not?
It's in other words, it's a subconscious cultural problem that we still see this as a, you know, as you say, a prison colony. And that's why I was very much involved in the restoration movement related to criminal justice system. Where's my book? I didn't bring it. The Breakout by Newt Gingrich. I advise everybody to buy that book by Newt Gingrich, Breakout. Now, as you know, Newt Gingrich is a stone Republican. He's no liberal, but he's about business. And he knows that the prison system in America is not about business that helps people. It is to help a select few. And that's why, Paul, we had it easy 60 years ago with the civil rights movement because all we had to do is think about equal rights. But now we are in the 21st century. I live 25 miles from Tallahassee, and I haven't met a Native American yet in Leon County. We have killed and liberated the Native American. Now, Paul, I'm so glad to have you a friend because you come along as another minority. Latinx, both the African American and Latinx are in trouble by the history of America. And that's why you are such a key person to try to help University of Florida to understand what the mission ought to be for the 21st century and moving forward to be a humane society. And this is hard work. I'm so glad I have grandchildren who understand.
Right. Well, John, we're getting some questions in the sidebar, and I'll give these to you as I'm reading them, questions directly for you. The first one I see is, what is the main message Dr. Due has for young adults who have shown their rage and sincerity?
The first thing, this is why I'm so happy and blessed that I had an aunt, Eva, that told me at the age of 4 that life is dangerous. Life is not safe. And Johnny, you have to learn to live in this world. And what I tell children today, the message that was given to my Aunt Eva, yes, applies to them. They have a condition of survival in this world. They need to understand what kind of role they want to play. They cannot accept the word of their teachers as the whole truth, because teachers belong to a union who fight for fair working conditions, not necessarily about changing the world. I worked in the labor movement. I know what that is all about. Each person, each child need to understand what my aunt Eva told me. The world is not safe, and you have to learn how to make it safer. And you understood this when I discussed this with you, 25 years ago, what my Aunt Eva told me. And you believe the same thing. Each person has to make a decision on how they're gonna make this world safer for everybody to live. That's within you.
So thank you. Another question we have, John, is from a young attorney. How can current attorneys in the 21st century be more effective in the current struggle?
I'll laugh because I was a problem to the other instructors in law school. I studied on my own what the philosophy of what the law was all about. So therefore, when I was in law school, I was a critique of the instructors. I didn't accept what the instructors said because I could read on my own. And this is what I tell children today. You have to read on your own because whoever is teaching you, you need to look at that person and say, now, who does he work for? You know, what is his name? And the reason Patricia and I got along so well, because I saw her as the law. Patricia was the law. You know, that was her attitude. I am the law. So Patricia and I got along just fine because we had the same mentality. And that's why I call myself do and do, you know, freedom law. More than civil rights law. See, University of Florida recognized my role in civil rights. But civil rights is a game for the power structure, you know? So I am about human rights. And that's what a doctor of humanity is for me, to help heal and repair humanity, because it is all messed up. Black Lives Matter for that reason. Black Lives Matter is that we need to use our blackness, as Fannie Lou Hamer said, in order to reach down and bring this poor white person up so that both can work to become a better people. So I don't know if I answered your question, Paul, because I started my rant.
I love when you rant, John. It reminds me, I feel like we're talking now and it's about 1 a.m. in the morning again.
Right.
But, and John, you know, that reminds me, you and I have talked about this, and I think you actually gave me this reading assignment about a decade ago, and you told me to read a book, which I highly commend to anyone, you know, watching us right now, by James Baldwin, called The Fire Next Time. And in The Fire Next Time, there's a letter to my nephew, and in which he says, you know, look, we're not responsible for racism. The problem here, as James Baldwin is saying, is that white people don't love each other, they hate each other, and they take that hate out on us. Mm-hmm. This is why I think your idea of humanity is so very important. It brings me back to, like, you know, James Baldwin in the great novels he wrote.
Exactly. That James Baldwin hit it on my head. That so many Europeans are so messed up. They transferred by anger and fear to us, you know, fear. They are afraid. As you know, Doctor, I'm always recommending books for you to read. If you remember, I told you about a psychologist by the name of Erich Fromm. Remember?
Yes.
Erich Fromm is like the Bible to me. He talks about our unhappiness and our insanity and the reasons for it. So be sure to recommend to your students to read Erich Fromm, where he teaches, one book is about escape from freedom, which means escape from the fear of freedom. There's a book about insanity. And when I'm talking about, when I say insanity, it's not a individual insanity, but insanity of society, a social insanity, which is part of our unhappiness and our fear of freedom. So Erich Fromm is very important to read as a student in order to understand how and why people are operating the way they are.
Yeah. Well, John, another question comes to us, and it's a question that really comes out of the struggles that we're in now. So the question is, how can minorities come and work together in solidarity when they're fighting their own struggles of oppression? And how can they close the gap when they feel divided?
Okay, that is a very important and critical question. One of the things I learned in being a lawyer and my practice of freedom law is find a way that what I'm arguing is to their benefit, particularly in relation to desegregation. My game, when I went to court to represent students who were arrested or picketing or sitting in at the lunch counter, a theater, is to go in the chambers of the judge where there were no court reporters and discuss that what I'm arguing is a benefit to the white community. If you desegregate the movie theater, if you desegregate the lunch counter, all these Black people are going to be rushing to spend money to give to you white folks. So what I'm trying to tell you, Paul, my role as a lawyer, as a freedom lawyer, is try to coach my argument so that it benefits the judge and the class that he represents. Hell with the law, what is the benefit to you and your friends as to what we need to do to move forward? And it worked. It has worked in my role as a freedom law. That's why I don't like to use the word civil rights lawyer, but freedom law.
Yeah. John, I wonder if you could talk about the relationship you had to Patricia Stephens Due, because, you know, tonight we've talked a lot about, you know, her work and your work. But I wonder, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, what made your relationship work in part was you saw her as the law. Now, I want to take you back to 2011, the evening with the Dues. So many people were so amazed because they said, you know, obviously John knows his place in that relationship. And Patricia speaks, she's the spokesperson, and John is there in support. Well, as you know, we live in a very patriarchal society to this day. And so watching the two of you in action was just so inspiring. Can you talk a little bit more about your relationship with Patricia, and especially the fact that so much of that relationship, the backdrop was, you know, there was tensions in you know, the movement, the freedom struggle, you know, life was no crystal stair for either of you. So how did you make it work?
Number one, growing up as a child, there was always a strong woman figure in my childhood. My aunt, Eva, my father's sister, who was a caretaker for a while. My grandmother, who was a strong personality in the household. And of course, my mother. And this is one of the this is part of the features of many Black families, is where the woman is the assertive figure in that household. The reason for that in the African American community is that if the male figure was assertive, you knew what would happen to him. He would be destroyed one way or the other. So in my time, African American female was able to be more assertive than the Black male. back then. And I don't think it has changed too much from that, because Europeans are scared of Black men, of, you know, and when somebody's scared of you, hey, you're in trouble. You know, they're less fearful of the Black female. So therefore, women have been able to be more assertive than Black men in our American society. And I didn't fight that. You know, as you know, I didn't fight to be the top dog. You know, my idea was trying to win some benefits for my client community. I did not have an ego that I had to be the top dog in a situation. So I think that is the big difference.
Yeah.
I didn't have to be a top dog.
Well, John, in fact, just to echo your point, I think I had to argue you into even the idea of nominating you for an honorary doctorate. And I wanted to share with everyone watching right now that when I first approached you about this idea, you said, Ortiz, there's so many other things you could spend your time doing more productively. Don't waste your time with this honorary doctorate mess. And the only reason you changed your mind was I said, hey, we could use it to do what we're doing now, which is to do a freedom, you know, kind of event, right?
Exactly. You hit it right on the head. I can use it for what I think is our mission for the 21st century. I can use my doctorate to move forward to what we can do to help University of Florida, you know, to help University of Florida.
Exactly.
Thank you, Doctor, for moving this thing.
Well, John, let's go back to this issue of mass incarceration for a moment, because I want to give our viewers tonight, I want to set the stage for a remarkable event, which my father and I, by the way, my father sends his kind regards. He's watching this tonight. My dad just turned 82. He's my role model and mentor. But my father and I watched you 2 years ago as you accepted your induction into the Florida Civil Rights Hall of Fame. And we were sitting at a table with you, and you had a bag, and no one knew what was in this bag. And you had that twinkle in your eye that evening, that kind of, I think of it as a troublemaker's eye. You know, I've seen that with colleagues here, you know, like Kenneth Nunn, who you know, like Sharon Austin, that you know, that kind of twinkle where you know, okay, something's going on here. And then when you went up to accept your induction from Governor Scott into the Florida Civil Rights Hall of Fame, what did you pull out? But an enormous, what was it? What did you pull out of that bag?
Prison uniform.
A prison stripes, right?
Stripe uniform.
Exactly, because instead of just accepting an award and saying thank you for the honor, you used your induction into the Florida Civil Rights Hall of Fame to talk about mass incarceration.
Yes, and Paul, guess who is an ally dealing with mass incarceration? Newt Gingrich.
You've talked about Newt Gingrich, and you've had me read that book. Now, you've also talked to me, John, about Sheriff Morris Young.
Yes.
In Gadsden. And can you talk about that, about what he has been trying to do?
Well, you know, since I received that, you know, award from Florida dealing with mass incarceration, I have become very close to Morris Young, because he is a forward-looking officer of the court as a sheriff of Gaston County, who also believes that mass incarceration is wrong. Now, you know, this sounds like this is a conflict but there's a position and a job in being sheriff of Gaston County. You think you would want more people to go to prison. But Morris Young is a human being, and he recognized that mass incarceration is wrong. But he is in a position, since he is a sheriff, and he can talk to the governor. He can help influence the governor that mass incarceration is not good restorative justice. Because Newt Gingrich has come along with that philosophy that mass incarceration is not good for America. And Newt Gingrich is not noted to be a liberal, he's a conservative. And he's about money. It's about profit. And mass incarceration does not bring profit to America. So I went to a book reading, Breakout by Newt Gingrich in some town in Georgia. And I walked in, and I was the only Black person at his book selling thing. So he had his wife to get a real nice soft chair, brought me to sit up right in front so he could sell his book, Breakout. Yeah. So be sure you have that book for your class.
John, another topic that you and I have talked about late nights is genocide and the topic of Native American history and the struggles that Native Americans have had in this country. Why do you think Native American history is so important?
Because we like to talk about Hitler in the final solution, but the gritty crime is what the Euro-American has done to the Native American in America. The European came to America think that they had a calling from God to take possession of America and dispose of the Native American. And this is a human rights issue that we still have not faced in America, how guilty we are about the genocide of the Native American. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, yes. And John, you wear a necklace. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I have a Cherokee necklace. At least I was told it was Cherokee. I was driving from Atlanta to Miami, and I stopped in Georgia at this store, and this lady behind the counter said, "Oh, you're Cherokee. I got some Cherokee symbols you might want to buy." So I bought this. I don't know if it's Cherokee, but the lady at that store said it was Cherokee. So I wear it around my neck because my grandmother told me that we are part Cherokee, and in our blood, we got some Cherokee blood in us. Forget the other blood, the Cherokee blood.
So John, you had, and we should wrap up because it's almost 8:30 and we want to do some ending credits and also give you the chance to have the last word, but maybe like a final last question. And it's kind of a big question. It's a late night question, frankly, because tonight you've taken us on this historical odyssey, this historical freedom journey. And you talked about your work with Patricia in the movement in the 60s. You talked about Mississippi, but you took it way back. You talked about the Americas founded really as a penal colony, as a big prison camp.
Right.
You've talked about the Holocaust, you talked about Native American genocide. And so a lot of grim things, you talked to us about a lot of grim aspects of history. And yet you are the most positive person I know. And even with all of these kind of grim facts of history, slavery, oppression, genocide, you maintain such a positive view on life and such an optimism. Give us your secret.
Because I have been able to explain my argument based upon business and profit. See, I am recognized as a civil rights lawyer, but I learned long before I was a so-called civil rights lawyer. I had to practice law that was profit to the power structure. And what I'm trying to explain is that what I'm doing is really profit to the power structure. And I've been successful in court with that argument during the 60s. It's difficult to make this argument in the 21st century, but I think Fannie Lou Hamer and others and people like you, we can teach the power structure that doing the right thing is business, not civil rights. It's about business. And that's what I'm working on, trying to make my argument in terms of business. Sheriff Marcion has discovered my game, and he's been trying to work with our governor of Florida with the same argument. And it's difficult because he has, habits, but he's working on it.
Right. You have to work on all ends, right? Well, Dr. Attorney John Dorsey Due Jr., it has been just an incredible evening to spend with you and your family. And I want to thank you so much. I'll give the kind of the ending credits and acknowledgments at the very end, but I know the night is moving on for you and your family, watching all over the country. So could you give us some kind of final words in terms of wrapping up? Not final in the sense that, obviously we're going to be talking to each other for years to come, but for the people who've kind of been watching or listening in tonight, can you give us some kind of words, kind of like, where do we go from here?
3 words, not a long speech. 3 words. Do you see this? You see what's in my hand?
Yes.
Freedom is not free. You have to work and pay a price to achieve freedom. And I thank you to teach University of Florida that giving me a Doctor of Humanity is more than recognizing my civil rights, but it's about business. It's to their benefit and it's to their profit for John Doe to have a Doctor of Humanity. A human right is where we need to go with this. Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Well, understand that. Eric Fromm, don't forget Eric Fromm.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, John, and I look forward to many more of our late night discussions. I want to wrap up the program for now, but just to let everyone know that we have a recording of tonight's program. You'll be able to listen to it, watch it in its entirety through the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program's website. We'll let folks know when that's available on our homepage. There's a lot of people I want to thank tonight. First of all, I want to thank John Doe and his wonderful family who are gathered around him right now. Lydia, Janita, Tanana Reeve. They were all in on this kind of secret plot in the beginning because we couldn't really tell John what we were doing because he kept on insisting that we could do other things other than nominate him for an honorary doctorate. So I want to just give a shout out, especially to Janita, Lydia, and Tanana Reeve for being so amazing and supportive and understanding. The process of nominating an individual for an honorary doctorate at the University of Florida is very daunting. It's really a 2-year process. It requires, dozens of letters, phone calls. I want to give an acknowledgement to State Representative Clovis Watson, who opened the program this evening. Representative Watson's endorsement of the honorary doctorate for John Doe is a really important part of the story. I also want to acknowledge Dean Dave Richardson, because to receive an honorary doctorate at UF, one has to have a college, and there are, of course, 18 colleges at the University of Florida. And so Dean Richardson really led the way for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences to be the college which nominated John for an honorary doctorate. For tonight's program, I want to, again, just give my highest shout out possible to Deborah Hendricks, our senior producer, our executive producer, our magic maker. She's the one who put this program together. And for our many alumni watching tonight, you know the magic that Miss Deborah does, but usually behind the scenes. Deborah is the person who teaches people how to do oral history, how to produce it. She never grabs a spotlight for herself. I want to thank another person who John and Patricia knew quite well and know quite well, Tamara Jenkins, who's the office manager of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Tamara put together the logistics for the program. She is just an amazing, leader and manager of our program. I also want to thank the students of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, both past, present, and also future. John, our students and staff worked so hard to put together tonight's program.
Okay.
You saw the poetry, the music, the testimonials.
Right.
And a lot of our students and staff are very shy, like you. They prefer to work behind the scenes. But tonight we asked them to be in front of the scenes, in front of the camera.
Right.
And I think they just did splendidly. I also want to thank the people who dialed in, who tuned into this program. It's just so inspiring to see so many people joining us via Facebook, via YouTube. We had at one point well over 200 people logging in at different moments. And I also want to, John, again, kind of lift up suggestions that you made earlier. Let's continue to learn from each other. Let's continue to participate. John, I knew if you could, you'd be out on the streets with us in the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
But there's so many other things that we can do in addition to marching, in addition to protesting. And John, you mentioned tonight the works of Frantz Fanon, Black Skin, White Masks, Wretched of the Earth. You mentioned James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time. You mentioned Patricia Stevens Due and Tanana Reeve Due, Freedom in the Family. There's so many wonderful books. You mentioned Eric Fromm. So many wonderful books and materials that one can put together and get into a reading group, right? And learn together. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out again to the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. You can listen or you can watch this entire program. Just dial into SPOHP, SPOHP, and you'll find your way to our website, and you'll be able to watch the program when we archive it. Might be one or 2 days, but it will be there in its entirety fairly soon. And I think, unless Deborah Hendricks has something else for me, that John, I'm going to let you have the final word tonight.
The final word tonight is that freedom is not free, and that the next generation must continue to struggle to achieve freedom in order to overcome the fear of freedom. And that's what a doctor of humanity means, to help nurse the community, society to be free. Thank you all. We've been partners all these years and look like we accomplished something tonight. So thank you very much. And growth continues by the next generation.
Yes. Well, thank you, John. And as we head out, thank you everyone for watching, for dialing in. You know, please continue to follow the work and of John Doe. Please continue to follow the work of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. We love you all, and let's continue to support each other. You know, solidarity, mutual aid. These are values that Patricia Stevens Due, that Fannie Lou Hamer, that John Doe have taught us and modeled for so many years. And so, just to echo John's words in closing, let's keep the struggle moving. Keep it going. So, thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
That was amazing. Oh my gosh.
Where's the check?
John, yeah. But no, we could.